Well, Donald Trump insists the United States will take control of the Panama Canal. He also said that he will send troops to handle immigration. Additionally, Donald Trump drew a hard line on gender, saying the U.S. government will only recognize two genders, male and female, and vowed to stop what he called social engineering of race and gender.
United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Well, joining us to discuss key takeaways from President Donald Trump's inaugural speech is political analyst Joi John. Good morning, and thanks for joining us again this morning. It appears you're still muted.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Good morning. I mean, first of all, I think I can say congratulations. Yesterday went pretty well, even if it didn't. It did come with bits of controversy here and there. So I'm going to start with, I mean, there's too many things that were, mentioned yesterday. The executive orders that have been signed, statements that he made in his inaugural speech and whatnot. So I think we should start with the pardons, that he gave. There's news that he has pardoned some of the January 6 accused. So let's start with that. How controversial is that? And was that always expected?
Well, it is definitely controversial, and with the president, he has the powers to sign into order whatever he deems appropriate. We did speculate that, but it just it didn't come as a surprise. But I think it was hit with a lot of backlash.
All right, let's talk about how there's going to be a lot of reactions, especially looking at the executive order.
Yes.
How do you think, how are the reactions coming? Let's just go straight to that. How do you think people would react to the executive order, especially the other political parties that would be there? Talk about even those who had initially said that they doubt he would put the executive order or push it immediately, possibly give it some time. Tell us about the reactions.
Well, the early reactions were reflected a mixed response amongst the American people. Supporters celebrating his bold approach and critics questioning his feasibility of his promises. We know that shortly after his inauguration, he signed a series of executive orders marking significant policy reversals in many areas. We're looking at the WHO rolling back protections for transgender individuals and imposing tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. So we anticipated that it was coming. He said that on the campaign trail, and he did it. But overall, it was a day of reflection, resolve, and I think I would say a renewed hope for the United States.
Yeah, I mean, but it might also come a little shocking, about going ahead with the WHO withdrawal that, he's just done. Has he given proper reasons? Mm-hmm. Do the American people know the reasons why he's done that?
Absolutely, absolutely. He did state it was due to the way they handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and he did this in 2020, but Biden reversed it. That was when he started it. So for this, it didn't come as a surprise for me.
Yeah, I mean, so if he's going back to COVID-19, does that, maybe put any fears that he still is going to be taking swipes at those who, maybe made his first time as president a little tough? I mean, and if the likes of Anthony Fauci weren't pardoned by Joe Biden, should they also be worried?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll say that Fauci feels he didn't do anything and did not deserve a pardon, so that's different. But with the WHO and the situation surrounding it, I think that it's beyond just the way it was handled. He also feels that the United States is billed higher than other countries. So there are other factors that went into that consideration for him to notify the WHO that the United States will pull out.
Okay, let's take a look at possibly we do have a graphic to display right there on the screen and see some key takeaways of the speech that Donald Trump made. So I'm going to start off first with immigration enforcement. Of course, declaring a national emergency at the southern border, deploy national troops to enforce immigration laws. As we speak this morning, we do hear that this has already started. I don't know if you also have information on that. We do hear that those who were likely looking to complete their documentation, there seems to be a halt on that. There are videos circulating online to show that it's, quick and running. There's also free speech. He's signing an executive order to end censorship and restore free speech in America. And then, of course, the one we did mention earlier, the Panama Canal, assert U.S. control over the Panama Canal. But I'd like us to focus on one of these. Let's look at free speech. What has it been like in America in line with free speech? And now that Donald Trump is here, he's saying, listen, it's free speech for all. Let's feel free to talk.
Well, America has always been a land of the free. And one of our rights really is the freedom of speech. I don't think any president will stifle that. And Trump is, if anything, Trump is here to enforce that. Now, don't forget that in his first term, he was deplatformed from Facebook, Twitter at the time, and he had to go form his own platform, the Truth social media platform. First time ever a sitting president had to go through that. So I know that in this time, he will ensure that every American, going by what he went through, would have the right to free speech.
Okay, and it's also something important that we saw yesterday, and that was the presence of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and every other major CEO, or almost every major CEO in America was present yesterday. What does that signify? Because we know what the last couple of years have been, even in his previous administration, and then when Joe Biden took over. What does that signify for the next 4 years in America? And is this really just politics being played, or do these CEOs really align with Donald Trump's ideas?
Well, this is politics, but that aside, they just did not show up at the event. They also contributed to his inauguration.
Yes, they did.
He raised, I believe, they did that. So they are showing support. We're used to people all queuing in. I mean, for the next 4 years, he is president, so you can choose however you want to play. But this was a rare political comeback that captivated global attention. So for every other person, every multimillionaire, anyone in tech who's queuing in, they know why they're doing that. It's beyond what you and I see on the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and yes, I agree with you. They did contribute, here and there. And of course, recently we've also seen Mark Zuckerberg speak, seemingly, badly about the Biden administration and, how they put pressure on him, in the early years of, Biden's, run in office. But I think it's also important to speak about the previous administration. While he was speaking yesterday, he gave a complete trashing to the Biden administration, while Joe Biden sat right next to him, there. Of course, Hillary Clinton was there as well. Barack Obama was also present, I beg your pardon. He gave a complete trashing to the Biden administration, as to how they ran the country, spoke about how they had more money to fund other countries and put into other countries while Americans suffered back at home. Is that also very, very significant? And, do the American people still feel that way about the Biden administration?
There are two sides of the divide. Actually, I would say three. Those who are also on the fence or those who are independent. But then every American feels the pulse of what's going on in the country. Trump his statements in his speech yesterday was nothing different from what we had on the campaign trail. He bashed the administration while on campaign and during his ordeal, his legal travails in court, and his speech was no different from what we had expected or anticipated that he would say. But I would say that overall he focused on economic resurgence, securing our borders, and restoring America's global strength. And those were key areas he felt that the Biden administration failed.
All right, let's look at what a lot of Africans have been used to, which is birthright citizenship. This no longer will hold. Have you gotten any reactions, especially from Americans? How do they feel about this? I do recall that during the road to leading to the elections, a lot of Republicans were in full support, in full swing of this, and saying that it no longer should hold, especially granting birthrights to anyone who just comes to the United States of America and decides to just give birth. Can you shed more light on this as well?
Yes, but just to be clear, it's not just anyone. If your parents are citizens and you're born here, you have the right to citizenship. What it's affecting are people who come in undocumented, take advantage of the healthcare system, have their babies, and apply for citizenship. In this case, it would no longer apply. However, what he's doing is he's not going retroactive. It's going to be more for the future, like for if someone comes in today and has a baby today, you're undocumented, your child will no longer qualify for the U.S. passport.
Okay. I also, want to ask about, when he's talking about the golden age of America, beginning, what exactly that means. And, so Donald Trump's first 4 years were really tough. He endured a lot of criticism from, both corporate media and even government agencies. I remember that there was I'm not sure who it was now, but somebody who was speaking and, talking about how he, didn't obey Donald Trump's orders. He ensured that, people under him also didn't obey his orders, when he, had asked him to do one thing or the other. So it was a really tough 4 years for him. Do you expect it's going to be the same thing now? Is the criticism going to be as strong as it was in his first 4 years? Or is the American, system going to be more relaxed, and accepting of Donald Trump this time?
I don't think so. And that is what keeps democracy alive. I think that American people will still express themselves, even if they are members of his party. With Donald Trump, or with any government here in the United States, our citizens keep the leaders in check without fear of any harassment or anyone trying to shut them down or arrest them, kidnap them, none of that. So he will be kept, the administration will be kept on their toes. When you talk about the golden age for America, the new age for America, I think that what he's calling for is national unity. He's calling for unity, uniting both parties and framing his agenda as one that will be received and respected or well received by both parties. And he wants to strengthen national identity rather than embracing the global collaboration. So he's more of thinking inwards within America.
Yeah, and what are your expectations with America's foreign policy, going forward? He has a couple of people that, he has appointed, that, a lot of analysts also have, their worries about, but Donald Trump has said that he's here to bring peace. Do you expect that he will succeed with the people that he has around him? A lot of them have been described as war hawks. And so will he succeed in actually bringing peace? Do you think America's foreign policy will be, able to actually stabilize the world? You can look at the wars that are going on, the Russia-Ukraine, crisis, the war in the Middle East as well. And of course, China, also in the picture. So will he be able to have a stable foreign policy that actually brings peace to the rest of the world, especially with the people he has around him?
I believe so. I know that there have been some controversy or criticism surrounding his picks, but Secretary of State Mark Rubio is no stranger to the political scene. He's paid his dues in politics, and we know him. We know his views and what he stands for. I believe that with Secretary of State like Mark Rubio, we will be able to foster a better relationship with our allies and with the global community at large. You talked about the way people perceived him. everyone is watching Trump. And with Trump, really, I did say in one of my contributions that you just have to stand by. Anything can happen. But the beauty of the American politics is that a president cannot wake up and enforce a policy. We do have a Congress that puts them in check.
Yeah, I mean, we could give. I mean, some people have given him kudos for Tulsi Gabbard's, appointment. Marco Rubio, yes, definitely, has, people worried. But my concern really is his ability to put his foot down, when these people are around him, I mean, and mostly because of the relationship the United States has with Israel. They call it their greatest ally, but there's a lot of people who do not agree with that. And the ability to stop the wars in the Middle East, to stop the death in the Middle East. Joe Biden was heavily criticized for failing to do that, and it's maybe one of the major reasons that he also lost, the election, for failing to stop the murder and the killings that were going on in the Middle East, by simply just calling them, his best allies. Anthony Blinken, of course, right next to him. And so my worry really is, does Donald Trump have the capacity to withstand that pressure from the Israel lobby and from other, foreign lobbies that might be, around his government?
Well, as a citizen here, I would want to stay optimistic, but I believe that when he embarked on his second missionary journey to become president, he knew what the odds were, he knew what the problems were, and obviously had formed a team to guide him. Allies and rivals are closely watching the start of his second term, so it's going to be an interesting 4 years ahead.
All right. Let's talk about the social media giants. I mean, talk about Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and the likes who were duly present. Can we also talk about the swift change, especially from Facebook, especially for users? If you get on Facebook this very minute and hour, I don't know if you've seen the changes very quickly where Mark has gone ahead to make that clear that he has removed transgender and non-binary themes from Meta's Messenger. How impactful do you think Donald Trump would be, especially pushing his plans, especially for America? How do you think it will impact heavily on the social media space, especially for the owners? Do you think they would bend very quickly to ensure that they align, or do you think there will be some form of pushback if there is?
I believe there'll be pushbacks where necessary, but for the most part, when a president signs an executive order or issues an executive order, you follow through, especially if you're a U.S.-owned company. It's a different thing if we're talking TikTok, that's Chinese-owned. But if you're owned by a U.S. Entity, you would have to comply to the law. So I'm not surprised with what happened on Facebook and then also on Instagram as well, which is owned by Meta. It didn't come as a surprise for me, but like I did say, it's going to be an interesting 4 years, but everyone will fall in queue. Trump is what we call the typical no-nonsense. And don't forget, he's not your typical politician that has to say something to make you happy. He shoots from the waist down and says it how he wants to say, but then the beauty of democracy, again, is that we do have laws in check to put a precedent in order.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, the next 4 years we'll see how things turn out for America and, of course, for the rest of the world. Joi John, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we'll speak with you again.
Thank you for having me.